Welcome to CBC Windsor News at 6. I'm Meg Roberts. Thanks so much for spending part of your evening with us tonight. There's concerns over landlords taking advantage of students as they're welcome back to the city for the start of the school year. Plus, we share with you what Windsor's biggest climate pollution problems are and the city's plan to fix them. And we introduce you to an equestrian who has her sights set on a competitive international tournament. A Windsor rental posting has gained lots of attention. The online listing shows one room stuffed with multiple mattresses laid on the floor. The living conditions have sparked a conversation about affordable housing in the city, especially among post-secondary students. The CBC's TJ Deer has that story.
I think it's rather unfortunate. It doesn't seem like obviously they would be the ideal living conditions, despite the fact that it is cheap. I would still say that's pretty debatable as to whether that's habitable.
This is the rental advertisement that has some Windsor residents upset. It's a room where mattresses are spread out on the floor, separated by a thin wall and portable cabinets. Each bed was being offered for $325 a month. The ad has been taken down, but not before Windsor's West End councillor posted it online. Although he isn't sure what the building regulations are for rentals like this, it raises concerns.
It's extremely disturbing to see photos of mattresses on a basement floor and knowing that this is how some people live in our community.
Many people who end up in rentals like these are students. St. Clair College says they accept an average of 1,500 international students each year, and they're offered assistance in finding housing before they arrive. The school's Vice President of International Affairs, Campus Development and Student Services says students receive documentation during their registration process that allows them to prepare for what the market price of rentals is in this area, so they're well aware of the price. The University of Windsor says they have resources available for students who live off campus, including making them aware of their rights under the province's Residential Tenancies Act. However,
because this is a very much an exacerbated issue as it relates to Ontario, and there is a housing crisis within Ontario, there's almost nothing we can do because this is a Facebook post. Is this something that we encourage our students to participate in? Absolutely not.
Costante says building more affordable housing and the city's pilot project requiring each rental unit in the West End to have a rental license are the answers. The aim of the pilot is to compel landlords to improve living standards in their units. The city received 722 applications and only 225 licenses have been issued so far. Those who are not licensed are either waiting for a first inspection or being asked to fix an issue with their unit. TJ Deer, CBC News, Windsor.
Windsor police are looking for a teenager who they say pushed someone off their bike, punched them, and stole their wallet. It all happened last night around 10:30. Police didn't say where. The victim sustained minor physical injuries, and a 17-year-old has been taken into custody. Police are still searching for the second suspect. Well, you might remember a game called Nicky Nicky Nine Doors, often played as a prank by kids ringing doorbells and making a run for it. But the game led to the arrest of a 15-year-old boy. Chatham-Kent police say a group of kids were playing the game in Blenheim last night. When the homeowner confronted the teen, police say the 15-year-old assaulted them. After leaving, the teen came back to the house after forgetting their bag behind. Police say he demanded it be returned before threatening the homeowner and her family. The youth has been released and is expected to appear in court on November 6th. He's been charged with disguise with intent, assault, and uttering threats to cause death or bodily harm. Residents are concerned about primary health care on Peely Island. That's after the permanent full-time nurse left their position. The mayor says the province is looking for a new one, but in the meanwhile, the spot is vacant. The mayor says the services have been sporadic as the Victorian Order of Nurses tries to bring in contract nurses to fill the gap. A petition has started with about 300 signatures.
What we're seeing on Peely Island right now is a really unfortunate disruption of service. It's really inconveniencing and causing an added layer of stress and cost to our residents, which is unfortunate. And we are pressing our partners at the province and at VON for solutions and quickly, because we do have a little bit of a sense of urgency, certainly around the winter looming, with the only access to the mainland being by air. We really are sometimes just one person away from disaster. So when one person leaves their position, it can take months to fill it, right?
Like other municipalities, Windsor is trying to curb its major climate pollution problems. A new report shows a serious progress has been made to do that, but there's work to be done in order to hit council's target. The CBC's Chris Ensing reports.
Windsor has seen huge cuts to climate pollution and are about halfway toward hitting a big goal. But getting the rest of the way will need major change. To put the community's carbon footprint into perspective, it would take a forest 50 times the size of Windsor to capture the greenhouse gas emissions produced each year. Here's where the emissions are coming from by sector. Residential, transportation, and manufacturing are the biggest emitters, according to a new city report. Council is using this report to see how things are going and what needs to be done to create change. This is where the majority of climate pollution comes from, using gas to drive around the city. We know that using electric vehicles will cut greenhouse gas emissions. City staff see another shift that will help hit their target. Getting people to walk, bike, or take a bus to get where they're going. Council has a goal of getting 1 in every 4 trips someone takes around Windsor to be a form of active or public transportation. But stats show right now 93% of daily trips in the city are in a personal vehicle. There's a lot of work to do if council wants to meet that target by 2041. Windsor's other problem, how much energy it takes to heat and cool homes. The average house in Windsor was built 60 years ago when building codes didn't include energy-efficient windows or furnaces. A typical Windsor home uses 20% more energy than the Ontario average, according to city staff. A big key to fixing that problem is retrofitting old homes. Windsor is trying to get 80% of houses in this city renovated with climate change in mind. That could mean improving insulation, upgrading appliances, or a more energy efficient ventilation system. Homeowners might be able to use a city program to help offset some of those costs. That program is expected to be presented to council before the end of this year. Windsor's other issue is what our economy is based on, the manufacturing industry. Those emissions dropped significantly this century, caused by recessions and getting coal-fired power plants out of the energy system. But things are picking up because of the electric vehicle sector that's coming online. City staff say that will cause short-term pain, but long-term gains. Thinking long-term, staff looked at the cost of doing nothing, saying that if Windsor had to start paying a carbon tax to offset greenhouse gas emissions, it would be $250 million a year.
So the cost of doing nothing is exorbitant. Not significant, exorbitant. So that's why we need to start making these decisions, these modal shifts, small changes.
This is the first report of its kind since council declared climate change an emergency in the city in 2019. These reports will now be sent to council every year. Chris Ensing, CBC News, Windsor.
Canada's greenhouse gas emissions rose in 2022, according to a report from the Canadian Climate Institute Advocacy Group. And the authors say that puts Canada's long-term climate goals into question. The CBC's Julia Wong reports.
Canada still has a way to go to get emissions under control, according to a new Canadian Climate Institute report. Total emissions in 2022 grew about 2% from the year prior. The oil and gas sector and buildings make up close to 3/4 of that total increase.
They're really offsetting a lot of really good progress on emission reductions across the rest of the economy. A 2.1 is not really going in the right direction. We need to be sort of 5.5% reduction every year.
Last year's emissions are more than 6% below 2005 levels. Canada's climate goal is to be at least 40% below that baseline by 2030.
We really do need to look at the oil and gas sector more aggressively, and we need to subsidize and help people in houses and commercial buildings to, basically reduce their reliance on natural gas.
The federal environment minister says the report's findings are encouraging, but admits more needs to be done. We know that we must move faster in implementing our 2030 emissions reduction plan, Stephen Guilbeault says in a statement. We continue to advance targeted policies such as the Green Building Strategy and the oil and gas emissions cap. A group representing oil sands producers says it supports Ottawa's efforts to reduce emissions by 2030 and eventually be net zero. But Pathways Alliance says Getting there requires a practical and achievable approach to emissions reduction to protect jobs and investment and help provide global energy security. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith says the province has reduced emissions over the years. She is urging patience.
You have to be able to implement technology as it's available. You can't speed that up. But I think Alberta has demonstrated a lot of leadership in being able to reduce emissions quite dramatically over the last 20 years.
As for the Institute, it agrees policies do take some time, but its hope is they will make enough of a difference to meet a target that's 7 years away. Julia Wong, CBC News, Edmonton.
Another major plant to produce electric vehicle batteries is going up in Canada, this time outside Montreal. Swedish firm Northvolt is building it at a cost of $7 billion. Federal and provincial subsidies for the project total more than $4 billion. Speaking at today's announcement, the Prime Minister said the investment is worth it.
This is a historic and transformative announcement. Northvolt's investment will bring end-to-end battery manufacturing to Canada, making our country one of only a few locations to have this capacity outside of Asia. This is part of our vision for a stronger economy for generations to come.
Northvolt says 3,000 people could be employed. Production is set to start in 2026. Two other companies have announced similar plants, one here in Windsor, of course, and another near London. While masking isn't mandatory for the vast majority of people inside Windsor Regional Hospital, they're making a return at some healthcare settings in other provinces like BC. Masks must be worn by all healthcare workers, volunteers, and visitors in patient care areas.
That includes all health authority, hospital, clinical settings, all long-term care homes, seniors assisted living settings, private hospitals, and private mental health facilities.
The decision is in response to rising respiratory infections across the province. The new rules come into effect next Tuesday. COVID-19 has been making a comeback in late summer and early fall in some BC communities, according to wastewater sampling. The province ended its universal mask mandate in healthcare settings this past April. The city is hiring for a one-of-a-kind position, one that requires you to live on city property rent-free. But there's a catch. You have to provide custodial and janitorial services, and you have to be a bit of a history buff. But you get to live in Windsor's famous Williston Manor. The future employee will maintain the historic house, including its 36 rooms within a 15-acre park. According to the posting, the job involves promoting inclusivity and increasing community engagement. The rent-free perk is for individuals and families, but no pets. The deadline for the job is Monday, October 16th. A local horse and rider are going places. Literally, they'll be traveling to Chile next month by plane. Lindsay Trinell and Bassie Rouge will compete in equestrian at the PanAm Games. If they place well, they could represent Canada in the next Olympic Games. CBC Windsor's Jacob Barker met up with the pair in Maidstone.
I compete in the sport of eventing, which is the equestrian triathlon. It's a complete test for horse and rider. We do dressage, cross country, and then show jumping on the final day. I've had some really great results with him this year. He's had international results in North Carolina and in Bromont and Kentucky, and so we got selected to represent Canada. It started last year. I had a second place finish in the 4-star long in Bromont, Quebec, and I've just been on the radar since then. I just have to prove consistency. So we're hoping to get Canada qualified for the Olympics next year, so that means a top 2 finish for our team. So we do have a good shot, but you know we need to perform on the days of competition. We call him Dreamy. His competition name is Bassie Rouge. He's 12 years old this year. We bought him when he was a 4-year-old, and we've trained him up from doing very low-level jumping to the level he's at now. We know each other well. He's a funny horse. He's hilarious. It's a dream come true, really. I've been going for it since I was 9 years old, probably. So a lot of hard work.
Well, we haven't seen the sun a whole lot this week, but that's hopefully about to change. Colette is back with us tonight with your full weather forecast. It's a little critter that's always underfoot, but generally ignored until they invade your outdoor lunch. CBC News has found one man who's turned them into a personal pastime. As Liam Harep reports, he's making a mission out of an anthill.
I've always had an innate interest, I guess, for ants especially, but insects in general and just nature. As a kid, I would just collect ants and throw them into a jar. But now for like the more professional side of it, you would collect a queen ant or a handful and you raise them and start colonies. And at the point when you actually have a colony, you become an ant keeper. So I have probably about 20 colonies that are in a decent, I would say, young stage. And I do have 20 or 30 small colonies from this year that I've just caught as single queens. Some of them have a little bit of workers.
How do you find your ants?
Within the ant keeping community, we'll just take strolls out in parks kind of around wetland areas, forested areas.
So if we were to collect these ants, how would we do that?
Anytime I'm out intentionally ant keeping, I'll bring this with me.
This is like quite the ant collecting kit.
Typically the queens are like boogieing, right? So you got to be quick before you lose them. I have some test tubes done up. They do need humidity or they will desiccate quite quickly. Gotta chase them in. Again, we're demonstrating. I wouldn't do this with a worker typically, but we're not gonna find queens and then get them in there.
Wow, okay.
This is an aspirator. So we'll take this and use it literally to suck up eggs, larvae of other colonies.
Do you think they're generally misunderstood?
I would say so, yes. 90% of the people just see ants and they just immediately want to get rid of them. They don't even think about the benefit they have to their yard, to their garden, to the environment. With the ants, you see this daily activity. You have different cases doing different jobs within the nest, and depending on what kind of setup you have, you can see it all happen. They have their little societies and their individual interactions with each other. Just you could watch them for hours.
Colette, I can appreciate his passion for ants. I really don't know how I stand on them. I mean, I can appreciate how strong they are, but I will say when I see one crawling on me, I'm quick to remove it. But we'll probably see a lot less ants now as the weather gets a bit cooler.
Yeah, we will see some changes to that, right? I know that I do take care to try and avoid the ant hills when I do find them on my path and try and just let them be. But that's a different story when it's on you, Meg, or in your house. So that's another thing. I like his fascination with them. I don't know. Okay, this is a bad segue. Fascinated with the weather that we've been having. Maybe not. It's not all that active, but we do have a trough kind of rotating, sitting over top of southwestern Ontario, or at least having the influence here. And so more cloud cover and some of the showers and the temperatures just a little bit cooler here. Now, those sustained winds, this week we've been seeing so much those winds coming out of the east, at times gusty, a little bit lighter as we move forward in time. And then we're going to get into a principal change in the direction of the winds as our ridge starts to slide away. And with that, we're going to see some real warmth coming our way. I mean, temperatures, okay, at this time of year, as we get into the beginning of October, most of our records for winds are around 30, maybe some high 20s, so probably not quite there. But I mean, it's worth talking about. It's worth having the dialogue. So I'll get to that 5-day forecast in a moment. I do want to show you this active weather we're seeing. So it is a little bit heavier, some of this rain out over kind of central parts of Lake Erie. And that's pushing from south to north. And so as it does London, this has been a day with a lot of showers there off and on. We're seeing Leamington towards Chatham-Kent, some of this moving in, but most of it is pretty scattered, and it will be kind of weakening and dying off as we go into the evening hours. So we'll see less of this moisture. There's that very strong ridge of high pressure. You get clockwise circulation, and so it's here that we're seeing that easterly flow that's been so strong. Once that continues to kind of move on, then we see that change coming our way. So do we still have some showers overnight? they become very isolated. Even the chance tomorrow morning, I've put that risk at about 30% for us because there just won't be too much to it. Yes, a bit of extra cloud cover, kind of variable clouds. We'll get some sun coming in and then a bit of cloud comes back. So that's what I mean when I sort of say that they kind of change through the day. But once we get past that and beyond this trough, we will have the sun coming back into the forecast and sticking around like dry conditions for several days. Low 14 to 15 overnight tonight. Tomorrow up to 22. If we can get some of that sun, the better we'll do with the temperature. But then look what happens. Saturday 24, Sunday 26. I would say Monday and Tuesday at least 26 and 27 in terms of where the models are putting us at this point. But definitely for the beginning of October, some unusual warmth coming our way.
Yeah, it's been a little doomy and gloomy around here, so those temperatures and conditions look awesome, Colette.
Yeah, they really do.
Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Well, if you're into videos of cute baby animals, we have a good one for you. That's coming up. International borders have separated Indigenous people from their homelands and extended families for generations. Now the new immigration minister says he wants to help Indigenous people cross borders more easily. As Olivia Stefanovich reports, the promise is a long time coming.
This is Kenneth Deere's official documentation.
Zurich, Montreal, Geneva.
A passport issued by his people because he doesn't see himself as Canadian.
We prefer to identify ourselves as Mohawk and travel back and forth in our homeland as Mohawk.
The U.S. recognizes a treaty that allows Indigenous people to travel across the border freely. But in Canada, it's not accepted, forcing Deere to constantly explain and justify his right to travel through his territory that stretches across the Canada-U.S. border.
It's incredibly frustrating, and also it's demeaning for the government of Canada to say that you can't cross freely in your own homeland.
Mark Miller learned a lot about the issue as the former Minister of Federal Indigenous Departments.
That's something that I think we need to fix as a country.
Now, as the new immigration minister, Miller says it's time Canada recognizes Indigenous peoples have a fundamental right to move freely through their homelands across international boundaries.
It'll take time, but it is one of my top priorities.
It's, I think, long overdue that Canada take this issue seriously.
Natan Obed has personally appealed to the government for help. The Inuit leader says families in Canada are separated from relatives in Alaska and Greenland. Communities cut off from traditional harvesting spots in the sea and land.
It disrupts our society. It disrupts the natural way in which we live our lives.
A senior government source says Ottawa is considering amending immigration legislation. It's also looking at whether to grant exemptions for Indigenous people living outside of the country to live and possibly work in Canada. A decision is expected by next year. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Ottawa.
Well, I hope I'm teaching you something new today. What do you call a baby porcupine? Well, it's a porcupet, and a conservation zoo in the UK is now the home for one. This new baby porcupet arrived in late August. They don't know the gender of the spiky little creature, but that should be revealed when it has its first checkup in a few months. It's a Cape porcupine native to South Africa and the largest of all porcupines. They face threats from habitat destruction and hunting. Well, that's it for CBC Windsor News. Don't forget, for news anytime, you can go to our website at cbc.ca/Windsor. You can also download the CBC News app for stories that matter most to you. And don't forget to watch The National tonight at 9 on CBC News Network. Thanks so much for tuning in. Looking forward to seeing you back here tomorrow night.